It has been a week. I was busy at work, I had appointments all week long, and looking back on last month, I realized that I didn't actually get any sewing done. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to work on sewing and we're going to hang out together and chat. So keep watching. Hi, I'm Tony, and this is So Lounge. This is actually the other side of So Lounge. I'm usually facing my sewing machine. So today I am working with Simplicity 3631. This is an out of print pattern. It is a So Stylish pattern. I don't remember when I bought this exactly, but I really liked this jacket and skirt combination. And the other reason for working on this is because Grandma is going to show me how to make bound buttonholes once and for all. This has been years in the making and I've never gotten it done and never had her teach me. And this is the year to do that. So one reason I chose this jacket pattern is because it only has 2 buttonholes. So I thought that would be a little bit easier if we have to make some practice buttonholes first and less room to mess things up since there's not like 5 buttons, there's just 2. Another thing I really liked about this pattern is that it has a raglan sleeve, which is going to make the whole process a little bit faster to get it all sewn. Now, I cut this out last year because I had the idea to do this with Grandma last year, and then I just didn't ever get a chance because the holidays kind of snuck up and I was making more wintry themed projects and not kind of linen look spring projects. But, we're now into the next year and the spring will be here before we know it. So I think it's a good time to start working towards some other projects. And, once this is done, then I can have another video with Grandma. So I'm excited about that. Now I have all my darts and buttonholes and center front marked. With this pattern, there's a piece of interfacing that goes along the front. So it is not one of the first steps in the pattern instructions to put it together, but I like to do all my interfacing at the very beginning before I start sewing because I don't want to have to stop and then go back to that. So this is iron in interfacing, which is kind of a misnomer because it's not iron. You don't iron it in. If you iron it in, it's going to move and it's going to cause problems. So it's really press in interfacing. So you want to get your interfacing all lined up. What I like to do is kind of run the iron over the fabric underneath to get it a little bit warm. And so it kind of, wants to stick a little bit more. And then I use a piece of muslin as a press cloth so that you don't melt the interfacing and it doesn't stick to your machine if it's not lined up exactly right. So I have that lined up. I'm going to move this other one out of the way and I'm going to use my iron to just press, which is lifting and putting back down if you're new to this whole process. I am using steam. The instructions for the interfacing generally say not to use steam, but I think it's okay when you use a press cloth and you're using a high heat fabric. Linen and cotton both can take a lot of heat, so that is the added bonus to my fabric choice. Okay, let's see how that's sticking. And it looks like it is nice and smooth in there. I do my markings all on the inside of my pattern pieces, so that's why I want my interfacing to be on the inside. And I'm going to just move on to the other piece and get that interfacing all done as well. Then I'm going to move on to the facings and get that interfacing all done, just because it's easier for me to figure out which ones need the interfacing at the beginning and not once I'm sitting at the sewing machine and trying to figure it out, which always causes problems. The good thing about the fabric that I'm using is that there isn't a right side or a wrong side. It's pretty much the same on both sides. So I don't really have to totally stress about which one of these I attach the interfacing to. I just need to make sure that it's on, the opposites so that I have a marking on that one. So let's put it on the sides where there aren't any markings. Now, since I cut this out last year, there are a lot of hard creases in my fabric that need to be ironed out in order to make this more usable. One thing to keep in mind is that when you are sewing and cutting and leaving things for any amount of time and they get wrinkled, it's better to just start with everything ironed so that you don't have to worry about trying to figure out, like, how do I get this crease out now that the whole garment's put together. That's kind of also the same idea behind pressing as you go, is to, it looks better if you press while you go. So this is the other piece of the sleeve. Let me press it from this side again because this crease is still here. Apparently I need to use some more steam. Press that in there nice and hard. I'm using a new iron. You may have noticed that. This Oliso iron was a gift from my grandma. It is not my favorite when it comes to just generally ironing. I will not give up my Rowenta. But as far as pressing goes, I think it's going to be better because it's going to stay hot in between the sewing parts when I need to come back and press. So you would think with all of the thread on this thread display behind me, I would have one that would match this fabric, and alas, I do not. So I'm just going to be sewing with white thread. There isn't any top stitching in this pattern, so I'm not going to stress about that just because I don't really feel like running out and going to go buy new thread right now. I really just want to sit down and sew. So in an effort to get started sewing sooner, I'm just using this regular Coats & Clark white thread. A lot of people don't like Coats & Clark, but this is what I've been sewing with pretty much the entire time I've owned this machine, and it's what my machine likes best. So I think you need to figure out which thread your machine likes and go with that as opposed to your personal preference. So before I get started, I'm going to wind 2 bobbins because that's another thing I like to do when I start sewing. And it just means that if I run out of thread, I don't have to stop and, get this all set up, start again, and then, totally disrupt my project. I can just pop out the bobbin, pop in the new one that's ready to go, and then everything is happy. Oops, I didn't do that. There we go. Just get this one threaded, and then I'm going to move on to the fun part of the sewing and start that process. Now, the first step on the pattern is to do stay stitching along the neckline and the tops of the sleeves. This is because the sleeves are raglan and they, kind of are part of the neckline and little parts of them. So we're going to start with that. I didn't used to stay stitch back in the day. I used to just go sew and hope for the best. And the point of stay stitching is to keep that curve from stretching out, that neckline, so that when you do get around to putting it all together, it works. And it hasn't stretched out and turned into a funky shape. That no longer matches the facing. So that's the other reason to do it. My machine lined up. There we go. All right. And I didn't thread it. So it's one of those days. It's like everything's running slow today and it's just going to get done when it gets done. I'm not going to stress about it because it is a yucky rainy day here in Texas and Houston specifically, and I don't want to go outside anyway. So let's see if I can see that. Yes. Okay. Skipping steps, I've got my bobbin in. Let's catch that thread. Now I'm ready to start and get this back into the cabinet. Okay, so I have a jar that I put these threads in somewhere. Here we go. It's my thread trash jar. Stay stitching is just regular length stitching. It's nothing fancy. We're just going to be doing it at an 1/2 inch inside the seam line. So, and you want to go from the outside towards the inside of the neckline. So on this sleeve piece, I'm going to be going from the shoulder seam towards the neckline or towards the center front. And I'm going to get my seam gauge lined up because otherwise I'll start sewing at 5/8. My usual stitch length is a 2.5. It's just kind of what I sew everything at. That's just kind of a regular, easy, lightweight to medium weight plain weave fabric. All right, now that the stay stitching is all done, I am going to do something that I don't usually do, and that is serge all the seams before I sew it together. I have historically sewn the seams together, then serged them, which it works okay. But I recently got a new serger. I was reading the manual and it said, serge your seams before you sew your garment together. So I'm going to try that and head over to my serger. So when it comes to serging, I am going to be just finishing the seams that would be just the plain flat seams. I'm not going to finish this armhole seam. I will do that after the fact. And then I'm not going to finish the bottom hem because on the sleeves, it's actually folded under and then stitched. And then on the jacket, I'm going to try a new stitch that apparently this overlock machine can do, which is a finished edge blind hem stitch. So we'll see how that goes. That'll be a different day. Today is just basically getting this jacket together. And I have my machine all threaded and ready to go. And so I am just going to, and I'm still getting the hang of this. So, okay, so it says to line up the edge with the edge of the blade. Because you want to trim it, but you don't want to cut the whole thing off. So I think that looks right. You know what? I'm going to try this with a piece of scrap fabric first because I don't want to ruin this and mess it up. So thankfully, I have some little pieces of scrap fabric over here. This was actually the original piece that I had used for the facing. So let's lift this up and try this out. I'm getting used to this machine because this is actually the first time I'm using it. So, all right, let's see. Okay, so that looks pretty good. You can see it looks nice on both sides. One of the reasons I bought this machine is because it just automatically adjusts the tension and you don't have to stress about trying to figure that out. I have an older serger that I bought on sale back when Hancock's fabric was still a thing, and it's just really, really hard to set. And then add to the fact that it's very hard for me to see things that are close up and like at this certain distance range now, even with my glasses, my reading glasses, not these glasses. So that's another reason I got the new serger, because it has automatic threading as well, which was very, very helpful. And I got it all ready to go super fast this morning, so I'm excited about that. Now you may be wondering why I am using pink serger thread to finish the edges, and that is because the fabric that I'm going to be using for the skirt is this really pretty colorful Japanese fabric, which has the pink in it. And I have some big pieces of scrap that I saved, and I'm going to use those to make down buttonholes, since you need a different, or you need like another piece of fabric to do that. And then I also thought it would be really pretty to cover the buttonholes in this same fabric. And then that way it would kind of be like a whole look to go together. So pink serger thread to finish the seams is the way that I am going to go with this project. So I decided I was going to finish the front edge of my jacket with my serging, and I did that on both sides. And I'm thinking that once I get the side seams sewn together on the sleeve and the actual jacket, then I will go back in and finish the armhole before I sew the two pieces together. That way it'll all be neat on the inside. And next up is going to be doing some darts. So I'm just pinning these together and getting them all lined up. Now, I was reading an article in Love Sewing magazine, and they were talking about sewing darts the couture way, which apparently is from the bottom, starting at the point and then sewing back out, which just kind of sounds a little bit stressful to me. So I'm just going to sew my darts the normal way, which is from the top down to the bottom. This is not a super complicated pattern, and I don't really want to try something new today. Kind of been one of those weeks where it's just been so much going on that I just want to kind of sew and chill and enjoy the process. my darts look good. I'm going to tie them all off, then go press them at the ironing board. It's funny because now I feel like I'm making progress. I have the darts done, and next thing is sewing together the side seams, and then we're going to sew the sleeve together and put it all together. And it just feels like, things kind of start out slow, and then all of a sudden you you've got some shape happening. So that is the darts, and I need to press these on this side to make them flat. And if you don't know, when you press darts, you want them to press to the outside. So if they're like center darts, you want them to go out. If they're bust darts, you want them to go down. And these are neck darts, so you want them to all fold towards the shoulder into the armhole. So that one is done. Let's do the other one real quick. And despite ironing all of my fabric, everything is getting wrinkled again. I think it's just the nature of linen, so I'm going to stop fighting it at this point. Next, I am going to pin my side seams together so that I can sew those all up nice and neat. I'm matching the notches. The good thing about notching towards the seam when you do the serged edge is that you can still see it after the fact. It doesn't get mangled if you had notched it out. I don't know, I started notching my seams in towards the seam at some point, and I just don't even think about it anymore. A lot of patterns say to like notch out a triangle, and that's what I did when I was learning to sew. But the problem was I didn't always get the triangles like completely straight and where they were supposed to be. So then they didn't match up right. So I just decided notching on top of the pattern marks is the way to go. And so that's what I've been doing ever since, and it does work a lot easier than trying to make your own triangles and hoping that they're in the right spot exactly. So I have the side seams of the jacket all pinned. I'm going to pin my sleeves together too, so I don't have to worry about that later. I can just do that. The way that the pattern said to do it is to sew the shoulder seam first and then sew the inside seam, but I'm going to get everything pinned at this point. And that way I can just do it in the order that the pattern suggests, but I don't have to stop again and do more pinning. I don't know about you, but when everything matches up at the end and it's like I cut everything out perfectly, it makes me really happy because so much of my early sewing days were spent with, uneven hems. We were like, how did that happen? I don't know. I thought the two pieces were cut the same size. And then once I started making my own patterns in college, it was just total chaos. And I never had seams that were the same length. And looking back, I probably should have made more of an effort, but it was one of those things where nobody really said, hey, you should pay attention to this and make sure that this all matches before you start cutting your fabric. Now that I'm going to be sewing at 5/8 of an inch, I'm going to put my magnetic seam gauge back on where it needs to be. And move the sleeves out of the way. I'm going to start by sewing the side seams of my jacket together. And when I do this, I always start from the armhole edge because that's the one I want to make sure is lined up perfectly. If the hem isn't exactly perfect by the time you get down there, then you're fine because you can always just adjust accordingly. But when the armhole is wonky because it didn't match up, then you're going to have problems putting in that sleeve. And I like my sleeves to go in as easily as possible, so I try and avoid that. thing to keep in mind when you are pressing your seams is the type of thread you're using, because I'm using polyester thread and this is cotton linen. I need to adjust my iron accordingly because I don't want to melt my thread. Now, I am going to also use a press cloth to just keep that from happening, but just remember that if you forget that part, you might end up with some goop on your iron, and it's probably from melting thread. So let's see how that looks. And let's press this open. That way, just to be on the safe side, I always use a press cloth. I don't want to have any problems. And I have done that before. And it looks nice and neat from the outside. I'll press it right here one more time. A little bit of a crease. This fabric's creasing a little bit, so. Okay, now for the other side. And then I'm going to do the sleeves. All right, so the base of the jacket is done as far as side seam goes. I'm going to do my sleeve. And as I was sewing this, I remembered that I needed to press open the seam. So I unpinned the other side of it. I was a little ahead of myself there. And then I am going to grab my pressing hand because this is a curved seam, and that'll just help with the curve around the shoulder. Now back to pinning my sleeves together on the underarm seam so I can get them sewn up real quick. Now I need to go press the seam open, and then I will finish the bottom of the sleeve. As I was pressing open this bottom sleeve seam, I realized that when I finish the sleeve, the thread's going to show on the right side. And I don't have any thread that's this color that's going to just kind of be, non-intrusive, that's not super noticeable. So I think what I'm going to do instead is finish the bottom edge of the sleeve with my serger. And then I'm going to put my sleeves into the armholes so that I can feel like I've gotten something accomplished today. And then I will go hunt for the correct color thread. So I am back at the serger. I'm going to finish this edge and then hopefully get these sleeves in. I realize that's probably going to be a little bit more effort in the end when it comes back to, putting in the sleeves and trying to finish the bottom of the sleeve when it's already in the arm's eye, but I'm not going to stress about it because I just want to get a little bit more on this project done today so I can, I'll just be at a good stopping point. Bottoms of my sleeves are now done, which actually look really nice. And added bonus for using the serger, I got to take off that little edge that wasn't even and, even them out before I do any additional sewing. Now, the thing about putting in raglan sleeves is it's pretty much the same way as a regular sleeve, but it's a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about, any ease. It's just going to work when you do it. So, and since this seam is open in the front, it's not quite as difficult as when you put in a shirt that doesn't have like the front opening. So I'm just going to get everything lined up. It's right sides together. I think this is right. Is that right? Yes, because then I'll pull it through, blah, blah, blah. And all the seams are on the inside. Yes, okay. Just trying to remember. I haven't done this in a while. I haven't sewn any kind of sleeve in a while, actually. All right, so I'm just going to double check I'm doing this right because I am a little bit nervous. Let's see, right side out, right sides together. Okay, so I've got it done correctly. Got the right sides together in there and the wrong sides are all matching up from this side. And so I'm just going to stitch this in place. Let me lift up my sewing machine to make this a little bit easier. So my sleeves are in. It is starting to look like a jacket, which is pretty exciting and not bad for a few hours in the afternoon to, get this project going and get it on its way. Now, the beauty of this is once I get the sleeves finished and get this front part tacked down, then it's really just the facings and the neck band that I have to put together, which won't take too terribly long, and then hem the bottom. And so those are kind of individual tasks that I could do during the week when I get home from work, just to kind of relax and let the stress of the day go by. And so that is what I'm looking forward to finishing up this week. But for now, I'm going to head out to the fabric store and get some thread that actually matches. So I'll be ready to finish my sleeves and the center front, as well as any additional stitching that I need for my neckband. If you've enjoyed this video, you totally want to check out this one coming up next, and I'll see you over there.